Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So today's video is going to be mastery guide for beginners and progressing players, because I did realize that I have posted several kind of like mastery videos on my channel in past. It has been a while since I did the last one, but nonetheless all of them have kind of been aimed at a point when you have already all of the mastery points available to you and when you have majority of the masteries unlocked. So this video is going to be a bit different. This video is going to be based on players who have recently started the game or simply haven't yet really kind of like invested much thought in their masteries, so and so. We are going to jump to the second scene now, and we're going to start the actual thing by first and foremost establishing the cost. So when we go to the mastery setups, we're going to see the Stony mastery cores and Carbonadium mastery cores, and they do cost quite many units, and therefore due to that, because these will be required for multiple masteries in order to unlock them, masteries is an expensive subject, especially when you're just starting out the game. However, I do urge everybody to understand that masteries is a long-term investment. Masteries is effectively kind of like getting a champion and maxing him out, because they will be with you no matter what. It's a very, very important point of the game, and certain mastery setups enable you to do many things much better day to day, every fight that you can access them basically. And now, although some masteries are class or champion ability specific, there are multiple masteries that form the very foundation of how we understand the game. Therefore, paying close attention to your masteries is doing yourself a huge favor in order to be able to defeat content more easily. So, in my personal opinion, sorting out your mastery setup is so much more important than buying some offer that might offer you a small jump in prestige or small chance at a champion that might be significant to your account, because there is no might, there's no RNG. This is all control in your hands. This is all how you want to customize your ability and to play the game. So that being said, for those of you who are subscribing to Summoner Sigil, I do urge to use the discounted Stony Mastery cores and do just that, because I think they're reset like once a week, and then basically just slowly but surely grind out the units and buy them one at a time, because 50 unit discount, for instance, on Carbonadium Mastery Core is a quite big deal. At a proper kind of like setup of masteries, you will use well more than 10-20 of these, probably like 20 most likely, something like that. And that's a lot of units. That's like 5,000 units, 10,000 units. And if you're able to save 50 units every time you purchase one, that's definitely a good deal. Additionally, sometimes they offer cash-based deals that typically are extremely good in their value. Now, all of the boring bits aside, we're going to go to my mastery setup right now. I'm going to remove all of the points, and I'm going to start how I would currently start building my masteries if I were to start a new account and if I were to start a new game, and the masteries that are kind of like most important for me personally. Right, and it all starts in proficiencies, not in attack, not in defense, because by far the most integral masteries to progressing in this game are found here. There are two masteries that you want to unlock immediately without hesitation, and without them you will be effectively playing a completely different game. And those are parry. And the reason why parry is so important, it's not because it gives you an access to that small crit buff. It's not because it lowers the damage on a well-timed block. It's because every time you parry, you effectively get a free, easy opening to your opponent. So you do not have to intercept, or you do not have to like block bait heavy attacks or anything like that. So when you're new in the game, getting parry is kind of like the most important thing. That's something you want to do day one, if possible at all. I think it's possible now. So yeah, parry is basically what makes this game run. It's highly utilized even at the end test of endgame content. So yeah, parry, very important. And now link to parry, not too far off. So then I would unlock this limber, which also does not cost any mastery cores to unlock, so that's cool. And I think it doesn't. And now at this point, you need to get dexterity, because dexterity is another mastery that completely shifts the dynamic of the game, because this enables you to evade projectiles. Oh, sorry, this is the mastery that gives you the crit buff. I know somebody in comment section is already typing it in, damn it! This is the mastery that gives you the crit buff. Parry does not give you a crit buff, it just reduces the damage. Well, either way, dexterity is the mastery that you do want to unlock as quickly as possible as well, because multiple of champions use projectile special attacks, and if you will be forced to block all of them, that will result in a large amount of significant damage that could be easily avoided. Additionally to that, dexterity also makes the gameplay in itself feel a lot more smooth, and you can get out of many different situations thanks to this mastery. The best bit about dexterity is that 1 point is all you need. Now with parry mastery, the more points you have, it does increase the stun duration. So I typically like to max it out, but that would still not be my first priority. But it's something I would keep at the back of my mind to kind of always come back to. When using your defensive mastery points, initially, honestly, there is nothing all that important. There are some things that are helpful, but for when you're just starting out, it's not that important to get there. This is going to be a tree when you jump back to when you have free mastery points, but don't quite have the units and resources to kind of like unlock the more important masteries. There is one kind of kingpin of defense mastery, which is willpower, which is for way later in the game. So initially, I would leave defense alone altogether. Offensively, some of the most important things to pick up, well, obviously have to start with a strength mastery. So that is a mastery where you also only want 1 point in. And then you have to unlock greater strength, which is also basically mandatory. Now, one of the first masteries I definitely urge everybody to go to will be courage, because courage effectively can help you in every fight where you are below 50% of the health. That happens much more often than people realize, and that is a very significant increase. In fact, still to this day, I run at least 1 point in courage all the time, no matter which mastery setup I use, no matter whether I run the suicide masteries, no matter if I run Mystic Dispersion. Doesn't matter. I always have some points in courage, just because it's a very kind of like cheap but effective mastery, and it comes in handy much more often than you'd think, because everybody likes to have that idea of themselves that I'm not going to get hit or I'm not going to take damage. Yeah, you will. Kabam's going to make sure of it, and you're going to make sure of it as well, because you will mess up eventually, just like everybody else does. So we're definitely going to add at least 1 point in courage. And the first kind of initial costly masteries, obviously, you do want to unlock Pierce. Now, Pierce is going to be one of the first masteries you have to use that Stony Core for as well. So this is going to cost some units. But you do have to get 1 point in Pierce, mainly because the most important masteries for beginner players lie just down here in lesser precision, and lesser cruelty, and cruelty. Now, I will not add more points in lesser precision, but if I were to start a new account, this is exactly where I'd put them in. I would max out lesser precision, and then as a second mastery I'd max out lesser cruelty. Obviously at any given time when I get a chance, I would try to unlock precision first, because I think precision is much more important, and then I would invest in cruelty. So these are the first kind of masteries that you actually have to actively save for, because they will make a vast difference in your ability to crit in the fights, and therefore by extension will make the fights a lot shorter and will make your ability to progress in game a lot smoother. So precision is the first mastery that you have to actively commit to, and I believe every level of precision costs like a Stony Core. So every level is kind of 135 units. So to max out the precision at this point would be like 700 units or something like that. And that is like your first big investment, what you should do. Precision is the first kind of like costly, semi-costly mastery that you need to max out. Until such point, there's nothing wrong in maxing out lesser precisions and lesser cruelty, stuff like that. Keep that in mind. So precision is the first mastery you want to actively focus on investing your units. And the reason why precision is more important than cruelty, because I have tested kind of like when you max one out, you max the other out and leave no points in the other one. The damage out is actually quite similar. Both of them do increase your damage by pretty much a same margin. But many champions have abilities that activate when you do crit, as well as crits themselves have kind of unique properties to bypass a lot of like armor or physical resistance. So the fact that the critical hit occurs in itself is more important the damage it crits for. That makes sense. I hope it does. Therefore, precision universally should be prioritized, in my opinion. So now that you have unlocked precision, you should invest in cruelty. Typically, for most part, I leave 4 points in cruelty currently as I run it. And this is kind of like your base skeleton. This is the main thing that you need to kind of like start venturing out more difficult content. Obviously, that still leaves us with many mastery points spare, because currently we have used only 17 points. The next thing I personally would suggest returning to when you have units, but meanwhile, as I discussed, another very useful thing you want and can do to yourself is you can make a minor investment in your defensive masteries. And the one defensive mastery that kind of makes a significant change in your gameplay is going to be the block proficiency. Because even though it's not the biggest increase in block proficiency, think about it. Every fight you take a hit in a block pretty much. Unless it's a very, very specific fight and you're like an utter ninja playing the game. Typically, even if you do perfect parries, that's still block damage. And your goal is to avoid taking damage altogether, right? So every fight this mastery is gonna come in handy. And every fight it's gonna somehow, even by a tiny bit, mitigate the amount of damage you're taking. And as you're progressing through the content, the block damage is gonna become more and more noticeable thing. By the time you reach Act 6, you're going to be afraid to take a hit in a block. But that is something that you're going to experience going through the game as you're progressing through acts, through story mode, through difficulty levels, through different AQ maps, so on and so forth. The further you get, the more serious is the block damage. When by the end of it, no matter how many points you have in block proficiency, the block hits are gonna be super painful. So that would be kind of like my first commitment to defense. Then my immediate notion would personally be to come back to parry mastery and max out my parry, because increased stand duration is a super pleasant thing. Additionally, this again reduces the damage that you take in your parries, and by this point you should be quite a bit more comfortable in utilizing this mastery as well as increased stand durations, just gonna help you bypass some of the stuff like limber or whatever else, some weird animations, because sometimes when you have the tiny little stand from 1 point in parry, it's just quite not enough to actually land a hit. So you do want to increase the stand duration. And then another important mastery that's kind of like an unsung hero of MCOC, in my opinion, is Stupefy. And this is where I would carry on before I do anything else that's remotely expensive. I forgot 1 point in here. Whoops. Need 1 point in dexterity. That's very, very important. That was like one of the first things that we have done. And then the unsung hero kind of like of MCOC is this Stupefy mastery that increases duration of all your stun debuffs. And that's unconditional, whether it's parry stun or whether it's your ability stun. And that, however, enables many champions to perform significantly better. Especially up until like Act 4, let's say, where opponents do not have access to their level 3 attacks. Because then you can just keep them stunned, and even if you mess up or if your stun duration expires, you can just drop another special attack and keep them stunned again and just completely cheese through them. All that being said, this is extremely useful mastery, and you do want to invest in it. It will synergize well with parry, as well as with a whole ton of different champions who have access to stun effects. So Stupefy is super important. And realistically, at this point, if you have reached this far where you're running the maxed out block proficiency, where you have the maxed out parry, maxed out Stupefy, 1 in dexterity, and you have the greater cruelty and precision unlocked, anything you carry on doing is going to be expensive. This is the core, the base setup that you want to have. My personal recommendation from this point forward would be to start investing in Despair, 1 point in Assassins and Deep Wounds. So that is this tree. Despair is a mastery that I personally do not like to kind of like leave my house without, if you can say that, because any champion pretty much has ability to inflict debuffs. Not every champion is going to heal, granted, yes, but there are many instances when you face champions that do have access to healing abilities or healing nodes, so on and so forth, and those quite often can be very tricky fights. And again, when you have points in Despair, you just do yourself a favor by having the ability to reduce that heal, especially because even landing a parry still counts as a debuff. So if you have a champion that can inflict, let's say, 1%, 1 debuff on its own plus a parry, and then for a quite significant portion of time you can reduce the amount opponents are healing. And not to mention that currently in game there are multitude of champions who can inflict 5, 10, 20 debuffs without that much of a problem. So having a point or a couple points in Despair, I think, is very important, but that is not an urgent thing. Again, I want to make that clear that maxing out Despair is something I encourage, but that is nowhere near as important as anything that we discussed till this point. And Deep Wounds is a mastery that obviously kind of depends on your roster and the champions that you have ranked. If you are relying on bleed champions, then certainly go ahead and try and max it out, because it can make a huge difference for many different champions like Blade, like Carnage, like Nick Fury, or many other champions that rely on bleed effect, especially if they are relying on large but short duration bleed effect. And 1 point in Assassin is pretty much what I normally run. It's kind of like a neat mastery, but I definitely don't recommend getting more than 1 point in Assassins. Now that you have started getting some points in here, additionally Glass Cannon is a very good mastery to have for it to be only a Stony Core mastery, because it's relatively cheaper than the ones that require Carbonadium cores like we saw here, because these are expensive. And Glass Cannon is a mastery that I certainly again encourage people to invest, especially till the point when you're going to be kind of completely done. So Glass Cannon, because 2.4% attack increase for a single mastery point is definitely not a bad investment, because it's going to be active throughout the fight. I know people are skeptical because it does lower your own health as well, but my kind of like thought process is how many times in a fight you hit your opponent and how many times your opponent hits you. So ergo, I think that the offensive benefit outweighs the defensive hurdle that you have to overcome. That is how I have always looked at the Glass Cannon. And another quite important mastery that if you wish to kind of like increase your defensive prowess is not going to be Salve. Salve sucks. Salve has always sucked. Salve is not a good mastery. Keep that in mind. It's very bad. It's the Recovery Mastery if you have access to obviously regenerating champions. Recovery Mastery is quite helpful. It is quite beneficial, especially if you still kind of rely on champions that do regenerate. However, again, it's nowhere near as important as having your crits and crit damage sorted out, as well as having your parry, dexterity masteries, and increased block proficiency. This is relatively situational, but it's good to have, and it's comparatively inexpensive compared to Carbonadium core masteries. And I know many people are gonna immediately comment on these Petrify and Pacify masteries. I personally am not a big fan of them. They can be helpful, in my opinion, especially the one that reduces the ability triggers, because then you can use it to kind of semi good option to reduce some ability triggers against stuff like magic in case you're going to be struggling, so on and so forth. But I personally do not enjoy these masteries. I personally pretty much never invest points in these masteries. At this point, when you have gotten to your 10 points in defensive mastery, when you have started working your offensive tree, you're pretty much kind of set. Then again, it's up to you whether you like Despair more. I personally love Despair. Then I want to max that out, because when you max out Despair, each debuff reduces opponent healing by 15%. That means if you inflict 3 debuffs, which quite many champions can casually do, already reduces their healing by 45%, which roughly cuts it in half. So that's a very effective way how to deal with healing in general. And obviously, if you run bleed champions, or they are important, integral part of your gameplay, then max out the deep wounds, which is also a perfectly fine thing to do, but it's not mandatory. It's certainly useful for many different champions, but this is already kind of like very I am lost for a word. Very privileged, I think. And I know you can't call it privilege, but it's fairly non-essential thing for basics, but definitely very enjoyable, if that makes sense. And yeah, at this point you're kind of done if you're not like into Suicide Masteries. And the next like large point is obviously the Suicide Masteries, and it goes to a very good level of confidence that I can say that pretty much vast majority of endgame players have Suicide Masteries unlocked, because there are incredible benefits that they offer. I made several videos specifically on Suicide Masteries, and I probably will do an updated version, but since this is kind of like a guide for beginners and intermediate version, I'm not gonna discuss it too much further. The only things that I will note is, if you do want to get into that particular mastery tree, you always want to start out with willpower, because that is also a costly mastery, especially because you want to unlock it gradually, because it will involve investment of 6,000 to 8,000 units or so. And the place where you want to start is willpower, because willpower can work well for you without needing these two particular masteries. These two, however, these two masteries in particular will severely affect your ability to play if you do not have willpower active. It's kind of like if you're trying to pour in coffee without a cup. Willpower is that cup that contains the coffee. It's not going to work other way around, right? That was a god-awful metaphor. God, what is wrong with me today? Oh, man. Whatever. The base point is, willpower is a place where you want to start, because it is a very helpful mastery, very great mastery that definitely provides you with a lot of benefits, and is extremely useful in many different situations, especially in Act 6, where for whatever reason Kabam seems to have taken upon themselves to acquire fetish on placing debuffs on you no matter what you do. So you can get a lot of free heal by it. But if you do not run or have no access to these particular masteries, then I can completely understand people who are hesitant to invest 15 points in defensive tree to access willpower. But yeah, anyways, back to Suicide Masteries. So willpower is a place where you want to start with, and if I personally had to pick, I would start by unlocking Double Edge. Because it's not a permanent debuff, and it's not a debuff that's going to mess with your healing abilities. So more champions routinely handle Double Edge much better than they handle Liquid Courage. Especially because also Double Edge is a mastery that enables like Corvus to heal, puts Omega in overdrive, so on and so forth. So Double Edge is the one that you want to go for first if you're forced to choose, and if you are impatient and you still want to activate that mastery setup. But my personal suggestion would be kind of either go both or take none, because surviving recoil is a very big disadvantage. It's a very annoying thing to do, and you will routinely lose health. Now, I will leave the rest for my Suicide Mastery video. Rehash of my Suicide Mastery video, but this is pretty much how I would personally progress through Mastery Tree. And as I mentioned, whilst you are accumulating resources to unlock some of these more expensive masteries, there is absolutely nothing wrong into investing in lesser precision while you unlock the precision. There's nothing wrong in investing lesser cruelty while you unlock the cruelty. And greater strength is also a worthwhile mastery. It does take a lot of mastery points, but if you are in a position where you're unsure where to put them, whilst you accumulate units to unlock these more expensive masteries, then do that. But do not get stale, stagnant. Do not accept that as your kind of like long-term solution. That would be a permanent home. That would be something that you need to account for. And do yourself a favor, continuously keep working on these masteries up until you can get them to something similar to what you have seen in this video at this point. And then once you have, it's up to you to choose, but I think that eventually you will still decide that it's time to unlock willpower, it's time to unlock liquid courage and double edge. Now, all of that being said, I hope you guys have enjoyed today's video, and with that, we are pretty much done for today. So, once again, if you have enjoyed today's video, then here's your reward for watching the video till the end. It is a very, very good looking gizmo. Not many people know that it's pretty much the original Baby Yoda. However, if you do not like Baby Yoda or Gizmo, well then something is severely wrong with you, and this unfortunately is what should happen to you. But I'm done with that, and I'm gonna catch you guys soon. See ya.